Hi, I'm Martin Mulcare, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Bozenna Hinton. Bozenna was the president of the Actuaries Institute of Australia in 2010. Welcome, Bozenna.
Great to see you.
Now, before we talk about leadership skills and the role of president, what do you think the audience might like to know, or perhaps need to know, for context about some of your business roles, some of your leadership roles in the past?
Probably at this from a bit of a different background to many people, and I'm sure I'm going to get to this later. But I probably had less experience coming into this role than some others. My background professionally is a mixture of reinsurance, direct office, and consulting roles. And also, I had a large chunk of time off looking after a small family.
Okay, well, that'll be worth exploring then about just what is different to some other presidents with quite significant corporate leadership experiences, because I think this would be very interesting. So, the range of roles you just outlined. So, what was your actual business role at the time you were first elected to council?
So when I was town council, I was contracting for a small actuarial consultancy just 2 or 3 days a week. But
Okay,
my main role was actually looking after my 4 kids, and they were aged between 5 and 10.
ah, okay,
So
okay,
at that time, I'd left full-time employment 9 years earlier and had been doing a series of contracting roles in between juggling my family commitments. And through all this, I'd kept volunteering for the institute as I really wanted to try and stay in touch with the profession and keep up my skills while I was still focusing on the family, with the plan that so when the kids got to be a bit more independent, then I'd be able to rejoin the workforce but still have all my skills in place.
okay, okay. That's excellent context. So, especially in that time, then, what motivated you to take on the role of president?
So when I first joined council, it was all about learning what was going on and getting involved, but it was still like relatively around the edges. So there was so much that was happening. It was so exciting, so much opportunity to get involved, but
Right.
I still wasn't involved in everything and all the nitty gritty. And so in that context, I thought, okay, why don't I take the next step and put my hand up for president? And that was a huge step. Like it was really big joining council
Sure.
anyway, because I was just doing a contracting situation. Every hour that I didn't work and it wasn't paid for, I didn't get the income in. So I had my family commitment and like I had a choice of my free time to spend working or volunteering or on the
Yeah.
family. And so it was a real decision to join council in the first
Yeah.
place and then to step up further to join the president. But I was interested in getting more involved and taking on that strategic leadership role and finding out more. And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. And I was lucky enough to be successful.
Okay, so that's an interesting kind of motivation. It sounds quite low key, but like you're just oh yeah, just want to get involved a bit more, see the bigger strategic picture. Was it really as what's the word, as simple as that, or did you have some higher level motivation? Do you think?
Look, I didn't have a view at that time. Like I hadn't been sat down and thought, I really, really want to be the
Yeah.
Australian
Okay.
president.
Yep.
It was so far above me that I'd never thought that I would ever get to
Right.
that level. And so it was really being in the right place at the right time and having that situation and and saying, okay, I've got this opportunity in front of me. Why not like seize it with both hands, have a go, take advantage of it, see what I can learn and grow and develop and add and be part of the profession. And who knows where it's going to take me.
Okay.
So it was really that. It
Wow.
wasn't that I had sat down and said, here's my strategic
Yep.
career path, and this is the
Yep.
next thing along the journey to do that. It was here I am in this situation, and we'll go from there. And it was very hard,
Yep.
and it was a huge commitment. And I think, like everything like that, you get a huge amount back as well. So I learned a lot from that presidential role. I certainly grew and developed a lot, and I hope that I was able to also contribute to the Australian profession at the
Well,
same time.
I'm sure, and we're going to explore some of that in a moment. But it is very refreshing to hear that you see it as kind of right place at right time, rather than having this being a driving ambition to be the president. Yeah. Okay, so you're in the role, and probably by what you just said, at first probably a little intimidated by the whole thing. So, in hindsight, what leadership skills were required in your presidential year?
So when I did come into it, I wasn't coming in totally cold. I had actually done a lot of volunteering through the Australian
Sure.
Institute up to that point. So like many people, I'd started off as an exam marker, right?
Yep.
And then I think I even did a bit with you, Martin, on the life insurance course review. Do you remember
That's
that?
that's my memory. Yes, indeed.
Yes, yes. And then after that, I'd been on the board of examiners and become chair of the board of examiners. And it was probably through that that led to me
Yeah.
getting my council role. So I had experience within the institute and outside the institute at chairing committees, and I think the governance and board leadership is a really big part of the leadership skills.
Yes.
Obviously, when you're going to be taking that on, you need to be able to effectively chair board meetings. You need to look at the fiduciary oversight. You need to balance the views of diverse members. And in the Australian Institute, we've got the life insurance, general insurance, super, health, banking. We need to be able to hold management accountable, set the agenda for the board meetings, make sure you're hearing from everyone and balancing all those viewpoints and making sure that you actually get a decision. In the international space, that's usually a consensus decision,
Yep.
maybe less so in Australia, but certainly reaching that decision. So governance and leadership is a key point,
Yeah.
a key part of it. There's also other points too. So strategic vision. So you are leading council, and together with council and the presidential trio, you're setting the strategic direction for the profession. And so you need to be anticipating how actuarial skills are going to evolve, identify emerging practice areas, and be able to position the institute to remain relevant and influential.
Okay.
There's other stuff too. Let me.
So just before you go, I'm very keen to hear the other stuff. But it's
Yeah,
interesting because I think audience members probably think about president and that latter part about strategy leading the whole profession. They probably think, oh, yeah, that's the role of the president. But they may overlook the importance of the governance skills. As you said,
yeah.
it's the management, i.e., the Actuaries Institute team you're holding responsible, accountable, but also having to manage and lead and run. The council, the board. So they're not
Yeah.
insignificant skills, are they? Those
Not, no, they're
governance
not.
skills.
So this, for example, the CEO is reporting to you. You're having to
Yes.
do the CEO's performance review each
Yeah.
year. We had just had, when I'd been president, we had just appointed a new CEO. So not me, but actually, no, I think I was involved in it as well, where we did all the whole interviews for the new CEO. So, that is one of the things you have to do whenever you do have that change. And you have to be so looking at the timeline of the CEO. How long have they been in that role
Yeah.
for? Is there going to be turnover? Making sure they have good career development. Look, they get to do all the stuff. You don't do any other of the other staff
Yeah.
management, but you are responsible for the CEO.
But even, I mean, not many members of the audience would have had a CEO reporting to them.
Exactly.
What would you say is the core skill about reviewing, uh, making the CEO accountable, undertaking that sense of they're reporting to me? What's the key skill for you, do you think?
You want them to be successful. And if
Yeah.
they're successful, the institute's going to be successful. So you want to enable their success. So you don't want to get in the way of their
Yeah.
success.
Nice.
You've got to be very, very careful about what's their responsibility versus the council's responsibility. And so having clear lines between that. And sometimes CEOs can go too far,
Yeah.
especially CEOs who are long tenured, because you have
Yes.
the revolving presidents.
Yeah.
And so then the long tenured CEOs can know more
Yep.
than the short tenured presidents. So that can be a problem. You have the different situation where you have a new CEO come in and they don't know, so you could be tending to
Yep.
do too much. So getting
Yep.
that balance right, but it's how you can set them up for success. You don't want to have to replace your CEO every 2 or 3 years.
No, no,
That's very, very expensive as a volunteer
of course.
organisation. So how can you actually enable them for success and
Yeah.
make sure that they have the support network that they need, and making the connection? So setting expectations and measuring those expectations, and giving them the right sort of feedback along the way, but you without getting in their way. You don't want to do
Well,
their job for them.
that's neat. That's neat. That's, very much what a good concept of really enabling, I think, is a good one. So let's go on to the things that the audience probably are more interested in. This strategy, this vision thing. So the vision thing, what's the significance of that for president of a profession?
You've got the vision, then you're really inspiring the volunteers. So without a
Okay.
vision, you're not inspiring them. The volunteers don't have to be there. They've all got like their professional jobs. They've all got their home responsibilities. They've all got a lot on their plate. They are choosing to be there. So
Yeah. Yeah.
why are they choosing to be there? What reason can you give them to be there to actually they can see actually this is actually making a difference. I'm really proud to be here. I'm wanting to give up my free time. I'm part of this. And then we can have all the volunteers like speaking together and all saying yes, this is what we're doing and moving the profession forward. So I think having that unifying vision is really, really important and central.
Yeah. But again, fascinating that you see the importance of that vision to inspire the volunteers. Because I can imagine the other arguments about the vision for painting the way, the way forward for the profession. But just the passion that you had then about inspiring volunteers is very impressive. Yeah.
It's both ways. So one of the key things, for example, on the international space, when I went into the presidency there, was the impact. So the impact is one of the key themes for the IAA,
Yep.
but over more recent years, the international body had been more internally focused. And I was very much that we should be externally focused. This is a key differentiator that the international profession can provide that the local professions can't. And how are we actually having that impact on the world stage and elevating the role of actuaries and making sure we're having the conversations with the right bodies at the right time?
Okay.
And so that was a real turnaround. And I think getting that message out there, and I think that resonated with people and they were happy to take that on board. So I think
Okay.
that it's that message out there. And then that drove a lot of the other things that we then did. So we went and employed a full-time marketing person. And obviously that person's going to
Yeah. Yeah.
take some speed, but actually so they can actually help craft the message. So when we have our volunteers going to all these different bodies around the world, they've got their little short pitch so they can say, this is what the actuaries
Yeah. Yeah.
do and this is what we can provide, and helping equip people in
Okay.
those situations.
Okay.
So
So,
we did.
well, I'm keen to talk about the International Association shortly, but I cut you off because you've got other things, other skills to talk about in your role
Yeah,
of
yeah,
president.
yeah. Okay, so going back to the leadership skills,
Yeah.
so we've talked about the governance board leadership, we've talked about strategic vision.
Yeah.
Another one is stakeholder engagement.
Yeah.
So as president, you are definitely the public face of the profession. So you need to build your relationships. It could be with regulators, government, media, universities. It could be on the international side, like I've just been doing recently with international bodies such as the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, OECD, the International Social Security Association,
Mm.
as well as the other full member associations. So stakeholder engagement is another key thing that you need to be able to do. Then there's also advocacy and influence. So you need to be able to represent the actuarial perspectives and be putting that forward and being able to influence stakeholders both within the profession and outside the profession. And then there's member representation. So you need to understand and balance the needs of all your broad membership group. So you've got your students right up to your
Yeah.
senior fellows, and you've
Yeah.
got all the different practice areas. And then even in the Australian Institute, we've got different geographies around Australia, and I
Yes.
think we've got between 20 and 25% of our members in other countries. So we have
Yeah.
to be able to balance
Yeah.
all those needs.
Yeah.
And internationally, you asked about that earlier. Internationally, we've also got the different cultures and the different languages. And so, you've got all of those things to try and juggle, and you've got to maintain trust and engagement throughout all those different people.
Yeah.
Then there's also change management. So all the professional bodies, they constantly face pressure to modernise. It could be the education pathways, it could be CPD, it could be diversity initiatives, it could be international competitiveness. And so as president, you've got to build consensus. Sometimes around you've got difficult changes.
Of course.
And so going back to the Australian Institute, when I became president in Australia, we had just introduced the more formal recognition of the associate
Yes.
qualification. And so associates were then able to call themselves actuaries. And you probably remember this, Martin.
I
And at
remember
the
it vividly.
time, there was a lot of member engagement and discussion about whether we would proceed with that change, and had been some resistance to it.
Yes.
But anyway, we went through, and it had just been made just before I became president, and so then we were sort of embedding that change during my presidency, and I think that's been a really positive thing. But it was a change requiring a lot of member engagement.
Of course, of course. Yeah, and I remember well because I was facilitating a professionalism course, and part of the deal was for associates to call themselves actually had to do the professionalism course. So I had this wonderful, wonderful intake of experienced actuaries coming along to do the professionalism course
Yeah,
to enable them to use the designation. So I
yeah,
remember it well. So change management, that's a tricky one because all leaders struggle with some aspects of change management. And something like that, where it's, as you've already described, such diversity in the membership and such a, using that example, a material change. What's your insight into, the key skill in change management?
I think you've got to listen to people. You've got to actually understand what their concerns are. Um, then you need to be able to, if they perhaps you don't come up with the ready baked solution, you come up with some suggestions and then ideas and help them come up with the solution with you
Yeah,
and together. When people have particular concerns that they come up with, listen to those concerns and questions because perhaps it's something that you haven't thought of and it needs addressing. And if you can then seriously address that concern that's come up and then build that into the solution, then that could be
yeah,
really powerful as well.
sure.
It also helps often if you've got some one-on-one engagement with people and can actually listen to them and have time to do that. And then, so behind the scenes, you've already engaged with everyone, and then you build that consensus view, and that's what you present. So you've already answered all those hard questions before you bring the final solution to council
Okay.
or whoever the body is.
Yeah, it sounds simple, but the power of listening if you're going to build consensus. So you've mentioned the International Association. Of course, that's your virtual background today, just to make sure we've got some branding. So, can you share with me and the audience your pathway to the leadership of the Actuaries International Organisation and some of the different skills? You've kind of alluded to some of them, but some of the different skills required there. What was
Yeah.
the pathway?
So the pathway was, well, when I became the vice president in Australia in 2008, I got told, oh, by the way, you'll be representing us at the International Actuarial Association. And I said, oh, what's that? Um, so anyway, that was my introduction. And then, part of my duties as vice president and then as president was attending the meetings. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be attending the meetings, I might as well join some of the committees and serve on some of the committees at the International Actuarial Association. And so I asked around and said, well, which committees do we have no Australian volunteers on? And at the time, it was the Social Security Committee, the Pensions Committee, and the Membership Committee. They were the ones that no one was interested
Yeah.
in. And I said, great, I'll join those three committees. So I did. And so I joined those committees and I started attending the meetings. And I was also attending the President's Forum and the Council meeting and some of the other meetings at the IAA. And so that, having been involved and served on those committees and for the 3 years, at the end of that, they were putting someone on the nominations committee, and I didn't know my name had been put forward. And anyway, I got told, "Carl, congratulations! You're now on the nominations committee." And I said, "This is a really big honour for Australia, but." I hadn't planned on really continuing my involvement with the IAA past my Australian presidency, but I was like, I couldn't really turn that down because it was,
Hmm.
yeah, it would have looked really bad from Australia's point of view. And so I joined the nominations committee, and then I also joined the education committee, and then a few years later became education vice chair, and then became education chair, and then had another stint on nominations, and got involved in other different committees. Um, and then became Australia's rep on the new strategic planning committee, and
Wow. Wow.
joined the Resource and Environment Working Group and was vice chair on that. So I got heavily involved and then joined the Professionalism Committee. So I was doing a lot of volunteer work internationally as well as doing stuff back in Australia. At the time, I was the Life and Wealth Management Practice Committee chair in Australia and then was on Australia's International Committee. So I was doing a lot of juggling of different things. But through in my international experience, I'd always said I wouldn't do the stand for the presidency because I was too busy with my corporate career. But things changed at the end of 2023. And so I thought, okay, I could put my hat in the ring and see what happens. And so I did. And I was lucky enough to be elected in 2024. So,
Wow. Wow. Oh, well, congratulations. That
thank
is,
you.
but it's a remarkable pathway stemming from your involvement in the Australian leadership. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
no,
Uh,
that's right. That's right.
and I did play guest at one of your professionalism committee meetings that you chaired, so I got to see you in action in that format as well. So, 2024 international chair. Uh,
share in
what are
2024.
different skills? What are different skills are required there, if any, from an international profession rather than an Australian profession or even any national profession?
I mean, the obvious ones are culture and
Yeah,
language.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and you can't underestimate those things. Even with people who seem to have very good English, you make mistakes. So a very simple one was I was talking with the executive director and I said, okay, let's meet in a fortnight. And he didn't know what a fortnight was,
okay,
right? So that's
okay,
a trivial one. And
yep,
then again, with the officer group last year, we had an English person, um, an Australian, me, and we had two Canadians, an English and a French Canadian,
right,
right? And the English guy said, "Oh, this thing is like pouring oil on troubled waters." And so the Englishman and I knew what we went, and the two Canadians thought we were making the situation worse by pouring the
oh,
oil on the troubled water. And we're all really good English speakers in that and that's so again two trivial examples, but the cultural challenges are very real. And because of the time zone differences, often you resort to an email rather than a phone call because it's physically impossible to have synchronous phone call across all the
mm,
time zones of the world. And then, Martin, I'm sure you've had this experience when you've written an email and you've meant it in a good spirit, and
yes,
someone reads the email and they think that you're yelling at them or angry at them in that email because they're
yep,
mad for whatever reason. Um, it's really, really hard.
sure,
And then, especially add to that, the English may be their second language.
yes, yeah, yeah,
Um, and I suppose, so one other thing is when I chair a meeting, I really try and include everyone in the room. And so there'll be the loud voices, they're easy to include, but there'll be the people who don't speak up. And so with those people, I will call on them and I'll say, okay, I haven't heard yet from person A, B, and C, so I'd really like to hear from you now. So after we've heard from this current person, I'm going to call on A, B, and C. And so I try and give them some time. So I'm
no,
not
that's clever. That's clever. Giving them a little bit of warning. Yeah.
Yes, I'm not trying to make it difficult for
No,
them, but
no.
I am wanting them to know that I really do want to hear from them, and so they
Yeah.
can have then some time to think about what their response is going to be. Even if they want to say I've got nothing to say, that's fine too. But I want to make sure that they've got a little bit of warning and that they are
Yeah.
included in the thing.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd like to think that inclusion, is a high quality for all these, but it sounds like in international role, it's even more important that inclusion, because of the cultural and linguistic differences, you've got to be even more deliberate about inclusion.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
being really aware of it. And I have to try and speak slowly. So that's a challenge for me, but I think it's very important. Some accents are harder to understand than others, but it's very important to make sure you're always thinking about people whose language isn't English,
Mm.
and are you including them? So, like one of my this year, I'm chair of the strategic planning committee, and there's a couple of people on that committee who I really, really want to hear from and encourage. And so I'm contacting them between meetings and saying, "This is the agenda. Is there anything on the agenda that you don't understand? Can you speak up in the meeting? Here are some items I think you would be good to. I'd like to hear from you on," and making sure that in advance they have that warning.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I like that deliberate approach. So, 2010, you've described a whole range of skills that were important and that you were able to apply in your role as president. Just thinking about 2026 and forgetting for now your international experience and international role, what leadership skills, if any, do you think would be different or required more or even new skills that would be necessary for the president in Australia in 2026?
Core skills are the same. And so the skills I was talking about before were things like your vision, your
Yep,
stakeholder
yep,
engagement, your governance and your board leadership, your advocacy and influence, your member representation, your change management, and even volunteer leadership. So I think all these things are really important
yeah.
and you want to be hitting on those.
Okay. So you come from the school that there are core skills and leadership that remain universal over time.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not going to dispute that, but it's worth posing to the audience. What do they think about how things change over time or not? And maybe it's also a bit of an ad for really honing such skills because they're still going to be required in 15 years' time.
I mean, there's always the problem of the day. And so
Yeah,
you might have a greater focus on the problem of the day,
of course.
of what comes up. So, for example, for me in my presidency, we were talking in the International Association about, which is an association of associations, right? So
Yes.
so it doesn't actually have a role for individuals, but we were talking about having a role for individuals, and there is a role for individuals. So and we all agreed we did want to have something for individuals as well as the Association of Associations. And then in the International Association, they have what we call sections. So it's groups of people with common interests. And they took this, or some of those people in some of those leadership roles took that as a threat when we were having this
Ah,
discussion. And so then there was a lot of time and effort speaking to those individual section chairs one on one and the section chairs as a group and explaining the difference. And there was a lot of miscommunication because people were hearing what they wanted to hear rather than what was being said. And then you had to say the same message again and again and again. So that volunteer engagement was took top priority for a lot of my year last year, even though my key theme was the whole impact and outward
yeah,
focus. And
yeah,
so it was a real balancing act between those two things for me.
sure. So, you're in a very privileged position, having led the profession in Australia, leading the international profession. So, what would you say is your broad perspective on the future of the profession? And I'm very happy for you to differentiate the future of the profession in Australia from the outlook for the profession globally.
So, look, I have to acknowledge that in Australia right now, I think things are pretty challenging. So, my background has mainly been in life insurance, and we've had rounds and rounds of consolidation. And that's a really tough place for many, especially life insurance actuaries. And if we looked what's happened in the past, you will remember when there was a big move from defined benefit to defined contribution. We can also expect that in the future there will be consolidation in the general insurance industry and the health insurance industry. Don't know the timeline, but watch this space. So this is the environment we're in Australia. However, look where we are. There are new roles opening up in climate. We've got those new S1, S2 standards. Actuaries are really well placed to be advising on those standards. There's AI. Look, we've seen a number of Australian AI firms being really, really successful. Previously, we had a lot of actuaries move into risk
Yep,
when we had the serial qualification, and risk management is a core actuarial skill. There's many
sure.
people in that field. Even in banking, when we had the situation in Australia when all the banks bought the insurance companies, a lot of actuaries moved into the banking space. I think actuaries are going to continue to innovate and move into new spaces. Actuaries are smart people. They're financially literate. They understand uncertainty. So they can speak to the actual problem
Yes.
or the issue, not just that black and white question that's being asked. And people like that with those skills are always going to be in demand.
Yeah.
So the challenge I see for the profession is for all of us to keep evolving and to be brave enough to explore these new opportunities.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I think one, I appreciate your optimism, but your well-reasoned optimism. But yeah, it's still a call, isn't it, to be brave enough to actually take the opportunities.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really hard. And so we've got a lot of new entrants coming to the profession. They are very few of them are going to work for a life insurance company. Some
yeah,
will work in the other traditional areas. Superannuation, like super funds are actually now employing actuaries directly. So that's funny, it's coming full circle. But they will also move into different areas. So pet insurance, there's a few more pet insurers nowadays. That's a different area. Travel
yeah,
insurance.
yeah.
Even back in my early in my career, I worked in energy pricing,
Oh yeah, okay,
um,
and that's yeah,
and lots of what you would call wider field areas. So there are those scopes, and like I've talked to many other actuaries who've also worked in those wider field areas as well. And I think because the actuaries won't be working in the traditional bit, they will be taking those innovative roles, and I think it'll be fantastic to see.
sure.
And one thing I heard overseas was, like the whole AI space. So first it was the actuaries in AI, and then oh no, we're just going to employ data and analytic people. But they found out that those people just answered the question in front of them. And
Yeah,
so some of those firms, I can't remember which country this was, they were saying, no, we're now going back to employing actuaries and training up the actuaries because they do actually understand the issue and they'll answer the problem. They won't just answer the whatever we ask them. So
Okay.
I think the future is bright. The future is there. It's challenging. It's scary because we don't know the answers yet. But I'm sure the actuaries are going to find a way, and the especially innovative Australian actuaries will find a solution.
Well, I'd love to finish on that bright, positive note, but I've got one question we ask all of the speakers to answer. So, thinking of young actuaries aspiring to leadership roles, what's your top tip for them? Your top tip for actuaries aspiring to leadership roles?
My tip is really learn to lead people who don't have to follow you, as this is going to really stand you in good stead when you've got to influence others. And that could be as a board or clients who can then walk away from you, or regulators or anyone else you're going to try and persuade. And so you can do this by seeking out roles where you've got responsibility without authority. And this could just be in
Nice.
chairing a working group through the Institute, say, or a project at your work, or coordinating a cross functional initiative. And when you're doing those roles, notice what works and what doesn't, especially if you've got a low key, a low stakes one to start off with.
Mm.
And then reflect on when people have followed you and when they don't, and try and work out why. And some of the things we touched on earlier can lead to this. So rather than just saying, okay, this is what we're doing, right? You could open it by framing the problem compellingly and then answering the question, and then drawing people in that way, and so they can start solving the issue with you rather than just saying here's the answer and then they might not like it.
Wow.
And we also touched on if they've got objections, when someone pushes back, then try and actually find out what the concern
Yeah.
is that's underneath that position, and if it's something reasonable that you haven't addressed, then make sure you can address it. So there's things like that, and even like, creating a small win early. So
Yeah.
when you're taking
Yeah.
it, see what you can actually deliver and say, yep, we've done a little bit, and that can help get people on board. So there's lots of different techniques you can do, but it's good um, trying to see if you can actually lead those people who don't have to follow you.
Yeah, yeah, very insightful and a great challenge for many members of the audience. You have to lead people who don't have to follow you. It has been a fascinating conversation today, and we've covered a lot of territory. Thank you very much for your time today, Bozenna.
Thank you, Martin. It's been a pleasure.